Welcome to the Stanley Street Social daily unpack of what was the Giro, but now it's turned into all the other racing that's on at the moment. Just the daily unpack, the general unpack of all the cycling racing that's going on in the world. Overnight Australian time, we had the Giro, the Vuelta, and the Pan all running. 3 races to watch today, Campbell. Did you get through? Did you get through all?
Yeah, I got through enough of each.
Yeah.
Probably the most exciting was the Drie Dags der Pan,
Yeah.
which is just one
Wild.
day. It was the last one-day race of the season, and oh my god, that was crazy. The
3
wind was
days.
up. There were Mathieu was going into ditches. Just highlights the way cycling is. You're on top of the world, winning Flanders on Sunday, and then you're on your back in a muddy ditch in Flanders the next. So brutal ride, and Quickstep were just superb. Really had the numbers there and didn't butcher it. A la a few years ago when they had 3 in the front and lost Ian Stannard. I can't remember what race that was, but they've learned their lesson.
Yeah. It was a Quickstep team victory, you could say. Just no surprise. Huge numbers in the front. It looked disgusting though. Like they're just the strongest guys in the world, just chopping turns as hard as they could in 50-kilometer winds.
It was
sideways
ripping, wasn't it?
rain. It was great viewing. It would have been horrendous to be there.
Yeah, it was. It would have been. And it just highlights how hard racing in the wind is. There was a little clip there in the last 15K when Jempe Drucker, he tried to get across, and he was literally 2 bike lengths off the front group and didn't get there. I reckon he could have thrown like a gel and just and hit the front guys, and then didn't get there and got popped. So it's the most exciting racing to watch, I think, that crosswind type of action.
And we were really we didn't really get much of it this year with the coronavirus pretty much cancelling the classic season, and then Paris-Roubaix being cancelled as well. So it was good to get a couple in. I enjoyed watching those highlights, and Flanders especially too last weekend. So
it's probably good for Quickstep to get the win too, because they were in a really good situation on Sunday. Bit of bad luck, so they got what they deserved at Depana with Lampard winning and the big El Tractor Tim de Klerk coming in for second. Doesn't normally get part of the accolades, so it was nice to see him get on the podium because he's always doing the job for the team. Still didn't win the race, but got something out of it.
Yep. And Trentin couldn't quite seal the deal for CCC.
I mean, it's hard to, isolate one person in that group, not from Quickstep, who was at fault, but he was there. He was literally on Yves Lampart's wheel and just let it go. And as soon as he let it go, that was the end of the bike race there and then. Really, I know Alpecin had 2 guys there, but yeah, that was an interesting move from Trentin, who is desperate for a win and was desperate for a win all season. End of the year for him.
You could say a rookie move.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. It seems like there's only one possible outcome from letting a Quickstep rider go. And that's 3 blokes sitting on, and the rest of them doing a whole lot of work.
It would have been nice to see Mathieu there in the last 10K too. Would have added something nice to it. But good thing is he got up on his feet and jumped in the vehicle. So it looked bad when he was on his back in the ditch, not moving. But he's okay. It looks like anyway.
Yeah. A little bit of housekeeping on today's podcast.
Yeah,
we've got we've been talking about the coronavirus for a couple of months now. Me and Cam have been throwing our super highly uneducated views at the medical world. So we've got the doc coming on at 6 p.m. From the UK. Dr. Henry West, a former cyclist from Hobart.
He's cyclist as a youngster.
he's jumping on the line to give us some intel into the COVID-19 and just share his views on it. So pencil in 6 p.m. You got to listen to us, Chinwag, for the next 25 minutes, but Westy will be joining us, Doc West, at 6 o'clock. Have you got his Palmares there? Or we're going to have to ask him?
We'll get it. Yeah, I know that he's at Oxford doing something in the heart-related side of medicine. So I will get him to introduce himself so we don't do him any injustice. And yeah.
Vuelta? Giro.
Your call. You drive. I'll follow.
Giro.
Mm-hmm.
The Giro.
It's all about the Giro.
It's all about the Giro, really. It just seems like there's a bit more to it than the Vuelta. I don't know why.
I think we're probably more invested in the Giro because we've been following especially
last night. That was a pretty special Giro stage.
Yeah,
to see Ben O'Connor.
Yeah, was he going to be able to back up the day after? Answered quickly.
Yeah,
he was in the move, and wow, when he attacked with 8K to go, he was looking $1 million, wasn't he? Just turning the pedals so cleanly. Gap got out to 20 seconds quite quickly, and then no one else was seeing him. And there were some super strong guys in that group as well. Dennis, De Gent was there as well. In Perstina, Zakarin, your man, Harm Van Hoek.
Yeah.
I think both our tips for the stage actually made their way into the break.
Our tips are pretty good all round.
Which was
also at the Vuelta, they weren't too far off.
No.
Although to make the break, if your tip didn't make the break, it was pretty much the 20 guys that were allowed to go on the breakaway that can climb. So it was a start. We've got Westy in the waiting room. Should we bring him in a bit earlier than expected?
We'll leave him there. Let's let him sweat.
We'll let him sweat for a little bit. We'll get through the rest of the Giro first. That was pretty special though. Ben O'Connor going solo, come up short yesterday, motored away to the group, and you only had to see his interview and a few other bits and pieces around it. That meant a lot, and a huge victory in the current circumstances. Yeah. We were talking about yesterday that his manager should be clipping his efforts so far at the Giro, but no need anymore. Chuck out the tapes.
Yeah.
All you need is last night. All you need is last night. Oh, it was good.
What you can do with that tape that you were going to clip yesterday is you can put that in the shredder.
Yeah.
And you can just show the Palmares to teams for next year. But we thought like he's clearly got the legs, and let's be honest, he messed it up a little bit tactically. So today he didn't even let that become a possibility. Just go and do it solo, be stronger than everyone else. That's the best way to win. So really nice to see. And when we had him on the podcast in the first week of the Giro, he was super motivated, wasn't he? And he was taking the responsibility of winning a stage on his shoulders for him, for the team. He really wanted it for both of those reasons, and to actually go out and deliver in a Grand Tour, it's really, really good from him. So I think we'll see him get a contract next year. We're probably going to see that anyway before he got this result, but that just really, really makes things solid for him next year, and good to see him get a win.
I think it's a good point, and it's a good piece for a team manager looking at a guy going, all right, he's in the situation he's in. It's not the best. NTT's no longer. He's out of contract. He hasn't performed all that much in the last. We couldn't this year. He had it planned. He had it ready to go. He took it on, and he delivered. It was pretty cool. It was very cool to see. GC wise, nothing.
A little bit slow, wasn't it? A little bit disappointing. Sunweb, they tried a little bit. They tried the same thing as the other day. Chris Hamilton came onto the front. He started to light it up. But the climb itself, it wasn't that steep, was it? It was sort of that lower alpine kind
It was
of
big ring climb.
Yeah, it was a bit. Ben O'Connor, I think he did the last 8K about the same time as the pink jersey group. So shows how quick Ben was going, but also shows that it wasn't super steep, and not so good for Hindley, who looks like he's doing really well on the steep, and Almeida can handle himself on those long sort of drags. So I think it all comes down to the Stelvio, because stage 20, I'm not sure if you've heard, Alex, it was heading into French roads, French protocol on COVID. That stage has now had to change. So no Isouard or no Col d'Angel. So I think they're doing Sestriere 3 times. It's an easier stage on paper, but I thought the Isouard was a really nice launching pad. So I mean, the Stelvio becomes even more important than probably what it was already.
Yeah. Yeah. Did someone butcher it a little bit? Like, just with Jai riding for this small piece, kind of attacking, but not really. I don't know. It was just weird for me. Why they put men to the front when they weren't planning on launching.
I didn't mind it. I think they had a little look, because you never know. If you don't try, you're not sure how your rivals are. Almeida could have been on a bad one on that last climb. At least they tried to do something. Okay, he was okay. Then shut it down and go again for another day. But yeah, I mean, Almeida, he's got some good teammates here as well. Masnada and Knox are getting stronger and stronger. They're growing in confidence the closer they get to Milan. So your tip 4 or 5 days ago that he was going to hold on is looking okay, but I'm still backing my tip that he's going to come unstuck somewhere, looking at the Stelvio.
And does it have to be tonight? Is that tonight's the night?
Well, I don't think tonight. Is tonight Stelvio?
Sorry,
it is.
Tonight's Stelvio, yeah. And then we got a flat stage, and then we got one more.
Yeah.
As you said, though, easier parkour, and then the TT.
I think the Stelvio is going to have to be ridden at 1,000,000 miles an hour tonight.
I want to see Jai Hindley launch on the Stelvio for Wilco to follow.
Yeah, it's all going to happen there and
Hindley to go wild. Would if you were the Sunweb manager, you were trying to win the bike race, taking your Australian bias out of the picture, what role would you put Jai Hindley in?
To attack on the Stelvio? I think you treat the Stelvio as the last climb of the day. I think you just get Ooman, Hamilton, tear shreds on it, Hindley to go, and then just 1-2 Joao all the way to the top. Yeah. And then see what happens after that, because until you drop him, you can't really make plans. And I just think this longer, what's the average of the climb? 7.4% for 24K, 24.8. So significant. And then the final climb is 9K at 6.8. So that's a very tricky back end to the stage. 207K, over 200K for a change. Ouch.
Yeah. You going to watch it? Day off tomorrow.
It's a public holiday in Victoria, isn't it? Not that it really affects me.
For the football grand final, we don't have.
I might. What about you?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it. I'm getting really excited about Jai Hindley. I got awfully G'd watching the stage last night for Ben O'Connor. I'm highly invested in the Giro at the moment.
Vuelta.
Yeah, just a quick fact here from Ben.
We're on schedule.
Just a quick fact here from Ben on Facebook. Is he saying that Ben O'Connor's cousin is playing in the grand final?
Possibly. I didn't know that.
Possibly. I didn't know that either.
Geelong player, yeah. I've never really connected those dots.
Yeah.
Sporting pedigree.
Yeah. Vuelta.
Mm. I think a firecracker must have got sent up the arse of everyone in Movistar because they had 4 guys in the breakaway at the Giro. They
We
tore
didn't touch on that, did we?
they tore strips
4
off
guys to
of
not even have
everyone.
one. Yeah, go on.
Tore strips off of everyone at the Vuelta. 60k to go. They're splitting the group in that sort of downhill / crosswind. Nothing really came of it, but they took responsibility and then rode the whole last climb. And the guy that was doing the riding ended up winning the stage, a little bit like we talked about, just sneaking off the front on that downhill. And yeah, hats off to Movistar for taking the bull by the horns and getting the job done.
And actually delivering. I was nervous for Movistar watching that final climb, just waiting for Roglic to win again, or someone else for them not to take the chocolates after doing so much work.
My boy Mars is looking $1 million.
Yeah, he is.
Just tapping there.
Movistar looking $1 million too.
Do you think it was for Valverde, or do you think it was?
Well, that's what I thought it was for, Valverde. But then he didn't even sprint.
I think maybe he was seeing if Mars could scoop up some bonus seconds, perhaps.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can think of. He didn't in the end. But again, just a surprise that it was for Valverde because he got popped on stage 1. Clearly had good legs. I think this stage was in their region, their home region. So obviously a fair bit of motivation and pressure, and they delivered. But Jumbo looking quite strong as well. Sepp Kuss having a little dig at the top of the KOM. George Bennett coming back on, and Roglic just following the wheels. So another day ticked off for them. But again, the GC just even more solidified than yesterday. Your man, Tom D, not quite there. Probably the end of his podium hopes.
Yesterday, I had podium hopes for Tommy D. I also selected Pinot for second. They are both eliminated from the GC come day 2. My entire podium.
My guys, on the other hand, you just want to have a quick mention?
My entire podium from the Giro was out of the race by the first rest day. And come stage 2 of the Vuelta, I don't have the second and third left. It's not going well. What do you think of Carapaz just going wild at the bottom?
I don't know.
Sending him him and a teammate went off the front before the bottom of the climb.
I don't know. It was a little bit bizarre, wasn't it?
It was real weird.
I don't really understand it, but clearly he's got super legs. He's got super legs. He was attacking over the top of the climb, carrying on that form from the Tour de France. So he's that sort of rider, though. He just loves attacking. He won the Giro like that last year, just always just being on the front foot. So I don't mind it. And if you're feeling that good and you're not going to get dropped after such a move, then why not roll the dice?
Yeah. Yep. I think that was all, though.
Do you want to have a quick little tip for tonight on the stages?
Little tip for tonight. Funny. Do we go on Vuelta first? Funny-ish stage. It's just like a 165k false flat with a climb in the middle, and then a little lump at the finish.
Yeah.
Let's go uphill all day.
All above pretty much 1,000 meters as well, just up on some Spanish filthy desert plateau.
I think Valverde is going to win tonight.
Yeah, I was going to say that too, especially the way he was climbing last night. I think if you had have said that before yesterday, that Valverde would win this stage based off his climbing on day 1, I'd probably say no, it's too hard. But the way he was going last night, climbing, he's still got that kick.
The way his team was going.
I think Valverde. But Dan Martin's previously been quite good in these sort of kicks as well. He's quite quick amongst the climbing group. So wouldn't mind Martin as it's kind of the tier 2 favorite. But yeah, I concur. I'm going to go with Alejandro Valverde.
And for the Giro?
Teo, all in. I think that it's just going to be raced so hard and so fast tonight that I can't see the breakaway getting to the finish. Just because there's so much on the line for the GC guys and the GC teams. They've almost got to treat this as the last chance saloon. So, yeah, keep an eye out for the Passo de Stelvio and warp speeds up there.
I'm going to go with Jai.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
So what does that mean for your man Almeida? Does he lose the jersey tonight?
No, I don't think he loses. No, he doesn't lose the jersey because I don't think Wilco's quite up to it.
Okay.
There's my punt. Jai to go wild, clean the stage up. The threat, yeah. I don't know. There's going to be some big energy in the quick step camp tonight.
Then I reckon I agree.
They would have taken a piece too that this is like the final hurrah before with that shortening of that final climbing stage. A little easier day tomorrow. The boy can TT. Hindley to win and secure his spot on the not secure his spot because I'm questioning his time trialing ability.
Yep.
But really put himself in the mix for a podium.
I like it. And you got to remember that TT on the last day is pancake flat 15K, so you can't lose heaps of time. So hopefully he can do a good one there. But yeah, still 2 big mountain stages to go. But tonight is now the big one with the Izoard and the Angel removed from the parkour.
Question from Sean on Facebook. You're taking bets on the Vuelta making it through all 18 stages. I've been wrong about the Giro so far, but with the full lockdown in Madrid, I can't see them getting the whole way. I was saying exactly the same thing about the Giro 2 weeks ago, and look where we are.
The man that we're about to bring in might have some answers on that.
Yeah.
It's a good segue to bring in the doc. Get him in.
Here he is. Doc West.
How you going?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. Got out of bed.
Where do we find you?
We're in Oxford right now, where I've been for the last 6 months in the best isolation environment I can gather.
Do you want to give yourself a quick introduction, Henry? Who you are, what your story is, etc., your credentials?
Given what we're going to talk about, it's probably more important to tell you what I'm not. So I'm definitely not an infectious disease specialist. I'm not a virologist, and I'm not a public health physician either. But I am an Australian doctor, currently studying a PhD over here at Oxford, in my final year now in epidemiology. So do have some insights into some of the things we might talk about related to coronavirus and its impact across Europe. And I knew for the folks back home, I guess they're wondering how the hell you guys know me. Used to ride a little bit with Alex and Campbell back in Tassie. They used to leave me behind on heels.
Mate, you were king of the kids in the 17s.
Yeah, hell of a days.
The virus, Westy, has it just been the talk of the town within the medical circles, within your work, within your study over the last 6 months or so?
Well, I'd say not medical circles. It's the talk of across the whole country in terms of life has completely changed. It's just a completely different UK. And I was actually in Paris the day before Paris went into a full-scale lockdown, just by chance, because I went to a meeting with some other researchers over there. Probably shouldn't have done that. But literally overnight, Paris shut down. Everything shut down. You couldn't fly from Paris to London the next day. Like I was lucky to get out, and then came back to the UK, where the government here were kind of a little bit more lagging behind probably where they should have been at that point. And then within a week of coming back to the UK, I didn't leave the house again for 6 weeks. after that. And then, so there was no going to work. So work was done. People were just at home. Streets were pretty much deserted for a couple of months, or a month and a half, and then things eased off a little bit. And so everything changed. It wasn't just work, it was social life, family life changed, everything. And you guys in Melbourne, you know a little bit about what that's like, having lived through one of the more severe lockdowns known to man. But I think most people in Australia don't really get what happened over here in Europe and other parts of the world as well.
Then you look at these bike races that are going on. Do you question that they're going on? On Sean's question that he just asked before, will the Vuelta get to Madrid?
Look, I think they've professional sports have been in a very tough position in trying to have events. I am personally surprised that events involving hundreds of people both participating and probably another few hundred people officiating and supporting, soigneurs, DSs, mechanics, chefs, masseurs, all the people that you guys know following along with these races. It's just pretty mad. It's crazy to think that you can have 12,000 cases. I just looked at the numbers for the province where the Giro is in. 12,000 cases in that province yesterday. And you've got thousands of people following this bike race. It just doesn't make sense that there's no, and then there's apparently 2 people went positive. It's very suspicious that there probably would be more people asymptomatically carrying the virus and potentially spreading it. Whether you can spread a virus to the person riding along next to you at 40, 30 k's an hour, I don't know. But I did a quick look when you guys asked me yesterday to come on here. I did a quick look of the literature about outdoor movements and spread of virus. There wasn't much directly on COVID, but there's good literature on the fact that between rowers, you could be sitting next to someone or behind someone in a rowing boat, rowing along at speed, and they can definitely get the virus, catch a virus from you. So look, it definitely suggests to me that the UCI's plan to have team pods, or bubbles as they've called it, team bubbles, where then all the teams merge into one big race bubble at the start of a race and then leave the race bubble at the end of a stage. There's definitely going to be prime opportunities for the virus to spread between the team bubbles out on the road, is what I'd take away from some of that evidence.
Can you talk to us, West, about the testing protocol, testing people that are not showing any symptoms versus testing people that are showing symptoms? Can you explain what we were talking about last night?
Yeah, so in testing, in some respects, the whole, I think what I mentioned last night, Cam, was they threw away the diagnostic manual when COVID hit and it got so bad. Because usually we wouldn't test asymptomatic people for a virus like this. To do that is unusual. Sort of from first principles, to test people who are asymptomatic is an unusual thing, and you need to have good reasons to do that. So, for example, here in the UK, just like what the WHO recommends across the world, there's no testing for asymptomatic people. So I was exposed to coronavirus 3 weeks ago. I was at a dinner, and a guy who was at that dinner the next day tested positive for the virus. So I then had to go immediately into 2 weeks of isolation, but I didn't get tested. And even if I did arrange a test, so some colleges here at Oxford can get me tested, and they for some reason think that's a good idea. It's not. If I tested negative, I'm not allowed to leave the isolation, because there's so many reasons why that could be negative, but I'm still actually positive. It could be a false negative result. And the main reason that happens is because you've tested it on a day where the viral load is not high enough to go positive. And so what's actually really scary for coronavirus, or this form of coronavirus, is that you're most positive, the time you're most likely to get a positive test result is the day or two before you develop symptoms. And so that means that to actually accurately be finding people with the virus, you need to be testing everyone. So this is going to be, it sounds a bit confusing because I just said you should never be testing asymptomatic people. But to actually get these people before they start developing symptoms, you're going to have to be testing everyone every day, because a medical test is a snapshot of that moment. That's all it is. You can't carry a test result forward as some kind of evidence that you are still positive. It doesn't work like that. You're not still positive. You're not still negative, or you're not, you're not still positive. It's a retrospective. The moment the test is done, it's done. That was a snapshot of time. The next day, you're just as likely not to have virus in your nose. So you need to, it's very complicated with coronavirus because of this fact that you're most positive before you actually start developing symptoms. And then after you start developing symptoms, you're probably only going to be positive for a day or two. So there's a short window where the testing is useful, and there's a lot of time where you're still going to be having symptoms where the testing isn't really going to be very useful. And I looked at what the Giro testing, they were doing what you'd normally what we would regard as probably the gold standard at the moment for the testing, which is a nasopharyngeal swab with a PCR analysis, which is good. But as I said, that's the false negative rate, meaning if you actually have the virus but you're testing negative, for those tests, the evidence suggests it's between 10 to 40% of the time those tests are actually incorrect, and they're telling people they're negative when they might be positive. So that's a huge range. And there's good papers from all around the world that the false negative rate can be as high as 40%.
Wow.
So there's a high chance that riders at the Giro currently have the virus, based off the virus already having been in the peloton and those riders being eliminated on the first rest day.
So the team pelotons, I saw that one person finally, or two people went positive on the first rest day, I think it was, and then their teams left as Mitchelson, Scott, and I forget which other one was.
Jumbo.
Left. Okay. So that is definitely how they'd have to operate. If someone goes positive in the team bubble, there's no escaping the fact that most people in that bubble are gone. This virus is like almost unlike anything I've ever heard about in terms of like infectiveness. Like there was one bloke the other day out here in the hospital here had it in a room where we were reporting radiology images, and everyone in that room, this guy was there for about 20 minutes, went positive. The one bloke is now an inpatient in the hospital on the respiratory ward, potentially going to get a tube down his neck because he happens to be fat and old. This thing is crazy infective. The people most at risk in these cycling events aren't the cyclists. They're young, very healthy, ultra fit, huge cardiovascular and respiratory reserve. It's the hangers-on at the hotel and in the team car who could be very unwell and end up in hospital and possibly end up dying.
So it does spread as wild as what has been reported. So it's just very confusing that there's very little positive tests coming back. But I guess what you've just been speaking about for the last couple of minutes, that perhaps is a reason to why that we're not getting 20, 30, 40, 50 a day.
Yeah, look, if the teams are taking the team bubble seriously and actually not having any contact with anyone outside the bubble, I don't know how that would be possible when the cycling team is having to, feed people and have people helping them out. Maybe they've got all the stuff they need, but if a team bubble could work, bubbles do work. Like small groups of people, it's usually, you'd think like maximum 6 or 8 is like the standard, but these teams are trying to do it on a bigger scale. So that can work, but bubbles can't be breached. And then every day, by design, these bubbles are going out onto the road and mixing, and in a 300K race, you could be within a meter of a dozen different people for more than 15 minutes, right? And people potentially breathing, coughing, spitting. I guess they've been told not to spit properly. But yeah, there could it definitely be spreading between the bubbles, which once it starts spreading around within one team, as I just mentioned, once it's in that bubble, that team would have to leave surely, because you can't have people sharing hotel rooms or sharing even dining rooms. This virus will spread. And it could be spreading asymptomatically, meaning they're not catching it because they're not testing these people every day. And even if they were, they could be getting false results anyway.
There was an example. So the two teams left on the first rest day. Another rider, Michael Matthews from Canberra, he left, but his team didn't leave. So, but also talking to the riders, they were saying, he tested positive at the Giro, but then he's taken 2 tests since and he hasn't been positive. They've both come back negatives. Is that what you're talking about, is that he's tested positive in that 2-day window and then he's got continual tests?
Yeah.
But it's past that point?
Yes. Well, I mean, I don't know the exact timing of all of this, but it's very possible that I could have someone sneeze all over me right now with coronavirus. I could get tested every day for the next 2 weeks, and I might only go positive twice. When I've got enough virus in my nose that the test actually is able to detect that virus. The detection of these viral particles is really complicated and difficult science, and so the tests aren't good enough to be able to detect whether you are still infectious. A positive test doesn't even necessarily mean you're infectious. That's the kind of level of science we're at here, where we're trying to just get people and we're telling people to isolate because that's the only way we can stop the spread of the virus. And just constant testing won't do that, and relying on positive results for people to isolate. It will. I can see why people like professional cycling bodies, all other sporting events and codes, they want to try and rely more on testing, so they're allowed to proceed. I can see obviously the clear reasons why they would want to do that, but there's going to come a time when people are spreading the virus unbeknownst to them because of the failures of that approach.
There was another example from the Giro. Fernando Gaviria, UAE rider. He's tested positive again. He was the peloton leader, testing positive at the UAE tour in February, and here we are in the back end of October, and he's tested positive again.
Yeah, look, I mean, I was curious. I read in the I think it was the Sydney Morning Herald yesterday online that they were shocked that someone had got coronavirus again in Sydney. But I mean, I know 2 people here in Oxford have had coronavirus twice. Like, you can definitely get it multiple times. There's no denying it. You probably have a short period of immunity after initial exposure, and where your immune system has geared itself up to this pathogen, this virus. So we think there's a short-term protection phase, but the evidence seems to be that wanes quickly. So you can definitely get the virus again. You may not get full-blown coronavirus, fever, cough, all the classic things, but you may still be carrying the virus, have some of the more unusual symptoms perhaps, which people don't really know as much about, but there are other symptoms of this virus, and be spreading it. So yeah, people testing positive multiple times is to be expected. One potential thing you need to remember though, is that with all these tests, there's going to be a number of people who get false positive results. And yeah, the problem with this this is a good point for the cycling setting, because best case for the current testing we have is about 1 or 2 out of 100 tests might return a false positive result. So if you test everyone at the Giro every day and tell the teams of positive results to go home, you're going to be telling 1 or 2 teams a day to go home when they actually haven't got coronavirus, because you're getting false positives. So the reliance on testing is just a busted concept as far as I'm concerned. You have to be testing people when they actually have symptoms, because Campbell and I were talking about this yesterday. I don't know, we're trying not to get too technical, but clinicians, when you approach a patient who might have a disease, are formulating in their mind a concept of a pre-test probability. So you're thinking about the patient's history, their exposures, and a bit of examination, and you think, wow, this is a perfect coronavirus case. I'm going to do a coronavirus test, and my pre-test probability for this is really high. You've got a 30-year-old bloke riding around the mountains of Italy on a push bike who hasn't got any other medical conditions, who's been in a bubble, apparently. Your pre-test probability of him having coronavirus is so low that doing a test on him is, goes against all sort of the clinical ideas of trying to diagnose the disease. And I know they're not doing it for symptom. They're not approaching this as a diagnostic for someone that is unwell. They're approaching it as a screening tool. But we've covered on this, we've mentioned this a number of times now. It doesn't work like that very well.
There's a question here on YouTube, Henry, that asks, can you ask you about lung capacity / heart function for the athletes that have got it? And also, what are the future ramifications of, you have COVID, you get rid of it, and is there still going to be things 5 years down the track that are going to affect you? Is there any research done on that yet? Yeah,
so there is. There's a lot of research about other similar coronaviruses. So you would have heard of SARS. I think SARS was 2003, was the giant global SARS pandemic. And then MERS, which is still in circulation, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. They are both coronaviruses as well. One of them is a little bit more similar to SARS-CoV-19. But we know from those there can be long-term respiratory ramifications for being exposed and having symptomatic exposure. What we're seeing now from this virus is what the media have started to call long COVID. And just reading the BBC this morning, the headline was older women most at risk of long COVID. So obviously some epidemiology came out that they're the most at risk group for this. But I think the understanding was that it's more younger people who are seeing these symptoms of COVID that are lasting on for months. And these are symptoms like lethargy, continual dry cough, shortness of breath on exertion. So, 3 things that for an athlete could be career limiting, if not ending, if your respiratory capacity goes down that low. And the reason for this, we think, especially we're talking about the reduced respiratory capacity, is with fibrotic processes that occur in the lungs when the immune system is battling virus. Like chest scans of these patients, you see what should be just perfectly black, clear lung tissue filled with air. These patients are white, like it's basically a liquid in their lungs, filled with immune cells, which are fighting both your body, the lung cells, and the virus particles. And that has serious effects on the lung tissue. It becomes really firm. It's not elastic, and the lungs are less compliant to expanding with oxygen when you're breathing heavily. So to be able to continue doing sport at a high level, I think you should be trying to do everything you can to avoid getting exposed to the virus, because exposure, even a small risk of that for a professional athlete, probably isn't tolerable, given that potential risk, I would think. There's no evidence yet about this occurring in athletes, so we don't know if people who are really fit to begin with are at a decreased risk of this occurring. That this is something that is occurring in younger people who are getting coronavirus.
If you had a contract next year, Campbell and Henry, there's a bit of question for both. If you had a contract next year, good results on the board so far, would you go, it's too risky to race, like it's not worth the potential long-term effects on my career, and I'll just go lock myself up, fly back to Australia, shack up in Perth? Or do you just have to race?
It depends on the race. I think a one-day race could potentially be quite a safe thing to do, where you're not staying with other people. You can go from your own personal base to the start of the race, begin the bike race, and you're out on the road in the wind. There's a potential small risk of exposure on the road. Maybe I'd live with that. Finish the race, go home, not hanging around in the hotels with another bloke in my bedroom, not eating dinner with 20 other team members and staff. I think single day events could definitely occur. I think the tour is just pretty madness.
So the Vuelta that's currently going on, like we said, there's a lockdown in Madrid. What are the chances, do you think, you're on the ground in Europe, a little bit closer to it? Do you think it's going to get to the finish?
So, sorry for my ignorance. Does the Vuelta finish in Madrid?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I mean, how are they going to run a bike race in a lockdown?
I don't know.
Lockdown, is it serious about the lockdown, or is it just like...
This is Spain, Henry.
It depends on the government. It depends on the government enforcing whatever's happening in Madrid. I'm not across the Spanish situation, but France now is very serious about the lockdown. So if and Spain probably should be as well, given their caseloads. But one thing I would mention is that case numbers now are not the measure that we should be following. So when you look at the initial spike of COVID, first wave, as they call it, across Europe, case numbers were quite low because we were not geared up to be testing people. We had no capacity to be testing people on a scale that was required to find a virus in everyone. And that's why people were really scared, and they thought this virus was really, really bad, because the fatality rates, the amount of people we were testing, were quite high. Well, we now know from looking back at modelling of actual people, like taking serum from thousands of people across the UK and testing those blood samples for whether they might have been exposed to the virus, the actual caseloads of that first wave were about 10 to 12 times higher than what was actually swab positive at the time. And now, because across Europe we're geared up the testing capacity, so Italy in particular, Spain and France have all now ramped up their ability to test their citizens. We're seeing huge numbers of cases. So, like, I think between 20 to 50,000 cases across Italy, 50,000 across Italy yesterday, 20 to 30,000 across Spain, if not more. And that sounds really bad, but it's the deaths, the hospitalisation rate and the deaths that really now become important, because those numbers are not increasing quite at the same rate as what the positive cases are. So you need to be careful when we look at caseload. We need to be more aware of the actual impact the virus is having. The virus probably, first time when we weren't ready, got into populations where there's high risk for people to die, nursing homes, places where there's lots of old people, essentially. And now we've had those people shielding across Europe now for months, not going outside, not seeing family, not going shopping, So these people are ready and not to be exposed. So just because there's a high number of cases doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be doing things in those places. But it's the governments of the day that are making those decisions. So if Milan's in a lockdown, I can't see a bike race just going through the streets with the entourage that follows. I don't really understand how you could say Milan's in lockdown and it still have a Grand Tour finish. So Paris did it. They weren't quite in lockdown as such, but they managed to pull off the full tour there, which I think shocked a lot of people.
Do you have any?
I was going to say, Josh in the comments saying pretty much what I just said. So most under 40 people, counting for most of the cases, but only 1% of deaths. And yeah, that's probably right, because these young people aren't dying, but they may be going to have other ramifications for their health, which most young people would not want.
What about for the future of sport, Westy? Like, what do we need for? This is a very big question, but what do we need for the cycling calendar return to some kind of norm, for riders to be able to hit these races in with safety? What does it need to look like?
I think there's a number of areas that need to change before large-scale sporting activities at a level of normalcy that we were used to can return. Everyone talks about a vaccine and like, when's the vaccine coming? Is it going to be this year? Trump wanted it before November 3rd for the election. We'd be lucky to have a good vaccine that's actually available to everyone that needs it before November 3rd, 2021, I would think. There's the trials for these things are ongoing. There's dozens of candidates around the world. There's one here in Oxford, which everyone's talking about. University of Queensland and Australia have a really good vaccine candidate. But these vaccines aren't going to be like your childhood immunizations, where you go get the shots and you walk out of the doctor's office thinking, wow, I'm now immune. Like, that's done. Measles, mumps, rubella, not going to get that. The COVID-19 isn't going to be like that. These vaccines are not going to be as successful, mainly because until now, there hasn't been any concerted effort to produce any vaccines for coronaviruses. There's been people working on this, but it hasn't been a global push to get to the bottom of why we can't create vaccines for coronaviruses. There's many scientific reasons why that's very, very difficult. Now we have that global impetus to do this. So there's huge millions of dollars and pounds pouring into this weekly to try and get this get this vaccine going. And they're still struggling to get this right. And whether we actually have a vaccine that is going to be able to be used in this kind of setting. So the setting we're talking about, young, healthy people who want to be protected from the virus so they can return to their sole business, which is cycling. We're talking months, possibly years. There's going to be vaccine candidates which get put out there on emergency measures. So like China is using the WHO protocol for the use of emergency vaccination to now vaccinate people at risk. So old people with comorbid conditions, that put them at risk for death from COVID-19. America is pushing ahead with trying to vaccinate certain people with experimental vaccines. Russia has their version of the coronavirus vaccine. Not sure I'd be putting the arm out for that one personally. I don't think we're going to be having vaccines play a big role in allowing us back to sport in the next couple of months. So I think we can put that on ice for a while. So then the other thing is, how do we do these races if we haven't got a vaccine? I think we have to think very carefully about the format of the racing, right? Short races where there's less time. The key thing is time of exposure. The longer the exposure goes on between people, the more risk you're at. So grand tours, it's pretty crazy for me that they have allowed grand tours to continue, given the time frames we're talking about. Within a 3-week tour, the time for exposure is immense. But I mean, just the fact that they've done it this year suggests to me that they're probably going to keep doing it, right? Like, coronavirus isn't going anywhere. We're probably just going to see the Grand Tour is going to go on next year. There's still going to be coronavirus in high levels of circulation across Europe. Maybe we're not going to see a big effect for cycling if they're willing to do it in, the year of the coronavirus. Maybe the effect's not that big.
Because you would think that this year would be the most unknown, the most the protocol would be at its loosest. So obviously everyone's learned a lot from this year. That if like you said, if they've done it this year in 2020, then going forward, I think we're probably going to just see them keep rolling on, unless there is some government intervention.
Yeah, unless things go. I mean, unless there's full on lockdowns, and they just can't do it. And maybe we'll just keep going. I mean, from a safety perspective, I'd definitely reiterate what I said. The shorter times of exposure, so one-day races or maybe short couple of stage races, are much safer than having to live in with teammates and be mixing the team bubbles on multiple days. I would not be trusting people. Like, when you've got, how many teams are there in a Giro? Like 20?
20 odd, yeah.
And how many, you guys are the ex-pros, right? How many people are associated with a team at a Grand Tour? Like,
there'd probably be 30 odd people.
Yeah. Are you really trusting 1,000 people, 500 people minimum, to be not socializing or talking for more than 15 minutes with anyone else outside of this race?
Absolutely not.
And we had the case at the Giro to start off with. It sounds like it's tightened up a bit since, but to kick off, they just had punters in their hotel. They had like the motorbike scouts, just general tourists. Like, there was nothing. There was no kind of control going on.
I mean, and if the riders are happy if the riders want to race, I guess, well, I don't know, maybe that's the wrong approach, because the riders want to race, right? No matter what, they want to get out there. Is that kind of the attitude, or are they more like, actually, do we want to be doing this right now?
For the most part, I think they do want to be doing it. There's a few individuals that have expressed a little bit of concern, but if they were really concerned about it, they just withdraw themselves from the race.
But that, it just comes back to some of the more fundamental questions about coronavirus and the economy. Because cyclists that's their income, and if you keep withdrawing personally from all the races that you're on the team list for, you're going to get your contract renewed when 2021 comes around, 2022 comes around. We still have got coronavirus, and you've proven that you're too scared to race in the peloton when the coronavirus is in high levels of circulation. Doesn't look good, does it? Like, these people are under pressure to perform. Just like the guy who cleaned up our bins out here this morning, he's touching all this stuff that the bin that I just touched with my hands 20 minutes before him, but he can't say, no, I'm not doing it because of a risk of coronavirus. It's the same situation everyone across the world, especially here, is in. Like, they're under pressure to perform, or not just perform, but to compete. And the teams, I guess, would be under pressure from the race organisers, and it seems like from the UCI, to keep racing, basically regardless of the situation. And I definitely agree with you that this year is the crux year for the virus. It will definitely still be here next year and following years, but this is, everything's new. We don't really know what we're doing, and we're making it up as we go along, in terms of government response, I mean. So, if it's happened this year, I reckon you're probably pretty sure it's going to happen next year.
There's Olympic Games scheduled for mid next year. Is there any chance of that going ahead?
I reckon they will. They probably will. Yeah, I reckon they will. They'll have a year to get what they regard as safety protocols in place, and try and initiate a COVID secure Olympic Games, I think the terms are. how they do that, I don't know, but I reckon they'll push on. The economy is like, we're not going to get an argument about health versus the economy and all that. I know you guys in Victoria have been following that very closely in the local press, but there definitely is a strong case to get on with it, to get on with normal life in the coronavirus environment, because we can't get rid of the virus completely, and Europe's not getting rid of this virus. Australia is at a point now where they've kind of got rid of the virus, but the conditions of that is enforcing international quarantine on all arrivals indefinitely. We're talking years until the vaccine is ready to go. There's no getting away from that. If you take away the international quarantine, you'll have hundreds of cases within 2 weeks, probably thousands, if they lift their cap on arrivals into the country. And so Australia is now going to have that as an impediment to both leisure and business travel, which is going to cost the economy. And so Australia's decided that's the approach they're going to take. Europe has gone the complete other way and we're dealing with coronavirus as a disease. We're not going to close borders across the EU. We're going to try and return to some level of normalcy, accepting that people are going to be exposed to this virus and some people are going to die from this virus. But they'll probably be able to get things like sport and the rest of the economy back ticking along at a similar level that's actually going on in Australia anyway, except that Australia's got this, the borders problem that they've now got to deal with and manage, just moving forward basically until either the vaccine works, which I'm not convinced, or they decide to ease off and let a bit of virus into the community.
Yes, the big topics. Got any last questions before we let Westy go, Cambo?
I don't think so. I think we kind of covered everything that we wanted to in that 30, 40 odd minutes.
Thank you very much, Henry. Much appreciated. Some great insight there, and hopefully you can return to some kind of freedom over there soonish.
Yeah, well, back out of the house now, at least out of isolation, so things looking up.
Very good. Well, do we want to keep chatting, Kev? We've got any other cycling to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we kind of covered everything early doors, and just looking forward to the Giro tapper tonight with the Stelvio. Big time.
Yeah. Alrighty. Thanks everyone for listening in. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
We'll be
Thanks,
back
Alex.
here tomorrow. 5:30 tomorrow. It will be should be a doozy.